Hello, everyone. I want to talk a little bit about the final exam and what you can do to start getting ready for it. A little bit about the logistics for this exam in terms of the timing. So, the final exam itself will be 110 minutes long. That is a bit longer than your first four exams. However, it does have a little bit more material on it because it is a final exam. So just be aware that although you do have a lot of time here, you are going to want to kind of know what you're doing. And the time for the exam is Tuesday, December 7th from 9 a.m. until 10:50 a.m. So we have that 2 hour block based on the district's final exam schedule. So please be ready to come to class at that time. Some of the logistics in terms of items that you will have either available or not available are listed here. So you will be provided with a periodic table. You'll be provided with relevant constants. So here I'm including the speed of light, Planck's constant, and the gas constant. So you'll be provided that information. You will be provided a solubility table, and you will be provided a standard enthalpy of formation table. So all of that information will be given to you as part of the exam. So you don't have to memorize that, write it down, or anything like that. You will need to bring definitely a calculator and a pencil. It doesn't matter if it's what number pencil it is. If you want to try using a pen, that's fine as well. Please remember to bring a calculator. If for whatever reason you don't have a calculator, um, please let me know because you will need to be able to do calculations on a calculator in order to succeed on the exam. You can have some notes on this exam. So I am giving you a couple of options here. We have had a few exams where you have had access to a 3x5 card. So if you want to basically have a 3x5 card for each of the exams, that is fine. You can have that, or you can have one page of notes. So page of notes would probably be just one side. So if you want to try to get everything on one page, that is fine. Of course, I'm talking here about an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, inches, of course. Or if you would rather use the 3x5 cards, both sides is fine for that. That is fine as well. Please do not have a cell phone visible during the exam. Of course, you can have one for emergencies, but it shouldn't be something that you are using in any way, or I should see out while you're taking the exam. So these are the things you'll be provided with, or you want to provide for yourself um, in order to take on the day of the exam. I want to talk a little bit about the distribution of the exam in terms of how much weight you should expect for the material covered on each of the first four exams and other material that will be on the exam. So I'm listing that here. You can see for each of the first two exams, they represent about a quarter of the material on the final exam. The third and fourth exams are a little bit less, so each of those are about 20%. And then the presentations are going to be 10%. And we'll talk about what that means here in a minute. When I say presentations, that doesn't mean your grade on the presentation, but the material that was covered as part of the presentations. Much of the material that was covered in the presentations is material that would traditionally have been covered as part of either exam 3 or exam 4. So it partly felt correct to weight those two a little bit less for that reason. Also, some of the more fundamental ideas in terms of what you would expect to know from coming out of a chemistry 1A course were covered in the first two exams. I could see making a case for maybe 2 and 3 being the most highly weighted. It's probably to your advantage somewhat that exam 1 has a bit of a heavier weight to it because much of what we've done since exam one has built on the material covered on exam one. So this is kind of how much you should expect each of the previous exams to matter on the final exam. Okay, so what does that mean when I say these previous exams matter? So 90% of the final should be very similar to something you have already seen. And by that, I mean you have seen that information on one of the first 4 exams. I'm not saying here that you will have identical questions. It's possible you'll have questions that are very similar, but the questions will cover similar concepts. So the final exam should not be a place for a bunch of surprises. 90% of this should look very, very familiar from having taken those first 4 exams. However, there was a lot, right? That's 4 exams, each of them 90 minutes long. Well, I guess some of them were not quite 90 minutes, but there were 4 exams, right? So that's a lot of material to condense into one final exam. I would recommend focusing on whatever was the most highly emphasized on those previous exams. And when I say most highly emphasized, what I mean there is that if you have a question that's worth 5 or 6 points, probably will be more important, or I should say more likely to show up on the final than a question that was worth maybe 1 or 2 points. So the bigger, the bigger questions that were worth more points are probably what will be important on the final. That doesn't mean to completely ignore all of the other things, but focus first on making sure you know those main concepts. If there was a concept from one of the modules that came up for whatever reason, it didn't show up on either of or any of the previous exams, it will not be on the final exam. So it's possible there was an idea that you thought was more important than it was. It didn't show up on a previous exam. It will not show up on the final if it was not on one of the first 4 exams. So if you know what to do on those first 4 exams, you will be doing very well for knowing how to do on the final. We'll come back and talk about that, what you can do with that here in a little bit. Now there's 10% of the final will be over the material that was covered on the presentations. So the idea here is that when the class is giving presentations, that is something that you want to be paying some attention to. So it's not that those people are talking and you're not responsible for listening. So there is an amount of the final that is going to be over that material as well. It's a fairly small amount, so 10%. It's possible to get a 90% on the final if you completely miss all of those. Of course, you'd have to do perfect on everything else. More than likely, you'll be able to get some of this. And this, when I say that, I'm assuming, of course, you missed your own question. So I don't imagine that will happen for anyone. Another thing I want to say here, so I don't want this to seem too scary, because there's a lot of dense material in each of your presentations, and I think we have 6 altogether. So you're not going to have to redo a problem that was like one of the problems that was done as part of the presentations. More likely what you'll be doing is matching ideas to their concepts. So for, I guess I won't give an example here, but the various ideas that were covered in those presentations, if you see those ideas, you would say, oh, this is this idea that I heard about. And the kind of the reason for that is that when you do encounter, if you do encounter some of these ideas later, you would know how to go back and track down what that was. And you might not be able to, you might not be perfect at doing it, but you would figure out how to do that by reviewing that topic. So it's mainly that you have a little bit of scientific literacy related to these ideas. So hopefully that doesn't seem too scary to you, but at the same time, of course, you'll want to be paying attention. even maybe taking notes as the other um, groups are doing their presentations. So what I would recommend to you for preparing for the final is to review the previous exams. That includes the practice exams if you didn't do that prior to taking the first four, but more importantly, those four exams themselves. Um, in fact, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to Canvas and show you where you can find this. Okay, so here we are on Canvas, and I'm showing you the student view, so you would see something similar. So I'm going to scroll all the way down to the very, very bottom because we're at the end of the class. And you'll see this module called Review for Final Exam. The video is going to go here when I've finished recording it. I'll probably also put in a discussion board. I haven't done that yet, but you'll see that showing up. And then you'll have your four exams. These are the exams that you've already taken, right? So you've done these before, but you've written on them, right? So if you want to go back and redo them, it might be helpful to have a clean copy so you aren't influenced by your previous ideas to keep that fresh in your mind. So I have exams 1, 2, and 3. I haven't put up exam 4 yet because I'm recording this before you take exam 4, but that one will be there as well. So I would highly encourage you, if you don't do anything else to study for the final, to go back and redo each of these 4 exams, kind of on your own, figure out what you can do well at, what you might need a bit more studying on, and then make your notes appropriate for that. So a few more things that you could do to prepare for the final exam. If you did struggle a bit as you were practicing those previous exams, find homework questions that are related to where you may have struggled. And one hint here is that there are some homework questions that do have the answers contained within the text itself. So you might go back and do some of those in those areas where you may have struggled. Prepare some notes with what you think you might need access to while you're taking the exam. Sometimes the process of making these notes is itself going to cement those ideas into your mind. So please feel free to write down either 4 note cards or 1 sheet of paper worth of notes that you will be looking at and have access to on the final exam. I don't have it on here, but of course you will want to be visiting tutoring or office hours as necessary with any questions that you have prior to the final exam. And then, of course, the last piece of advice I always have for your exams is make sure you're taking care of yourself in advance of that exam. So have a good night's sleep. If you don't have a good night's sleep every night, that's maybe a situation you have to be in. But if possible, give yourself the space for that the night before the final exam. Eat a good breakfast so that you have the energy to power your mind so it does well and you do well on the final exam. Good luck, everyone. Please let me know if you have any questions as you are preparing for the final.